Welcome back to He's on Fire podcast. I've spoken at length, meaning about 30 seconds or so here or there about Arizona State ever since the end of last season and ever since the end of the Pac-12 tournament. And ever since then, and Joe Healey just covered it on his most recent podcast on with the Devil's Digest and Hode Rubino and Brad Denny that was on there, and how everything just seemed to be negative with Arizona State. Everything did. And I kind of pushed myself away from it a little bit, but then we had Joey Ramos on, and he was great to talk with, and he got me a little bit pumped up. And then towards the end of the podcast, I started getting pumped up a little bit again, and I'm like, you know what? There is college football this Saturday, but college football just doesn't feel the same to me. There's something weird about it. There's not in the air like it used to be. Fall's coming, all the good shows are coming back. You got Game of Thrones again. Like, what year is it? That kind of meme that's going on. But then everything is changing in the college football landscape. And I saw something just last week that just gave me a holy shit moment. It said, enjoy these last 2 or 3 years of college football, because college football as we know it is going to be gone. And I was like, damn, maybe that's why I'm not getting excited. Maybe it's because of the Arizona State stuff that's been going on. Maybe it's the leadership, which I definitely want to get into to a point here. But football is back this Saturday. And when it's on, I'm still going to watch. I'm still rooting for those players out there. We may have disagreements with who the coach is, with the AD, yada, yada, yada. But I'm still going to support them 100%. And it is college football. It is my favorite time of year. So I decided to break it down with some people that know everything about the landscape. And we're going to talk about it here. He's on Fire podcast. Thank you guys for joining in. Let's have a good show. Let's go.
Urkavici sets, looks up, and it is caught! Down strong! Blitz coming, Matthews, Palmer extending the play, crosses the field, Larry Fitzgerald. Larry Fitzgerald is insane to the 4-yard line. Crowder looking, throws it alley-oop. Oh! He puts it down! He puts it down! They're getting a little wobbly. But downfield, just ASU. A foot race. They won't get it. Center field. The Diamondbacks are world champions.
And then I see that time when we beat Oregon when they were in the top whatever, and here I am getting pumped up again. Water is wet, right? A few updates real quick. Patrick Beverley just got traded to the Lakers with LeBron for Talen Horton-Tucker. And then the Diamondbacks lose tonight 5-3, bringing their record to 54-67, 56-67. I don't know, something like that. It honestly, it doesn't really matter because they're not out there to win right now. That's also frustrating in the Arizona sports scene. But I want to get pumped up about college football now. So first and foremost, we are going to welcome back the one, the only, Joe Healey from Devil's Digest. What's going on, man? Thanks for taking the time out again.
My man, always. And, watching that intro video, awesome as it is, I want to see some Emory Jones bombs so we can get Jaden Daniels out of there. You know what? He's kind of dead to me. So I think it's a great clip.
He's on fire.
I'm looking for some updates. So hopefully maybe Emory Jones goes deep against Oklahoma State, gives us some priceless moments, and we can get an update version.
And it's got to be a priceless moment, right? I'm really hoping we can get some. Last year I said in order for us to have the season that we want to have, you came back and you said, I said, what needs to happen? And you said, we need to right a lot of wrongs and we need to exercise some demons. And unfortunately, we did not exercise those demons. There's actually more demons now that we get to exercise. There's new ones. So, but we're going to get into all of that as well too. And then making his rookie debut appearance, Anthony Totri from PHNX Sun Devils. Anthony, again, thank you for taking the time. And how's it going for you tonight?
Of course, it's always a pleasure to talk ASU, man. It's beautiful outside, and college football, like you said earlier, is just around the corner. Can't wait.
It's a balmy 94 degrees at night down there in Tempe, right?
It's about
is beautiful.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think it was like 98, 97, but I'll take it, honestly.
Yeah, there you go. First and foremost, Joe, I'm very disappointed that you did not take the over in Case Hatch touchdowns this year. Last year,
right?
I predicted 4. That didn't happen, so I'm going to say 3 this year. Is that something you can at least get behind?
So the reason that I treaded lightly on that is because it means so much to me. I don't want to get my heart broken. Love Case. He's my favorite player on the entire team. I mean, really one of my favorite athletes that's come through ASU in a long, long time. Great dude. I'm connected with him in a few ways. Love the fact that he's got an NIL deal with WWE. I mean, the dude's a stud. So I want to see it. This is like probably the most I've ever wanted to be wrong. But it's one of those things where it's like, until I see it, until he gets the ball, until he touches, I don't think he's ever carried the ball at ASU. He has a handful of receptions. So I want to see it, and I will eat crow in a buffet style, hoping that he gets a ton of catches, ton of touches more than whatever we set it was, 17, something like that. I forget what we set the over under at.
He's getting the 3rd and inches from the goal line. He's going to take it in an I formation. It's going to be his only one of the year, and then he's going to get 2 receiving touchdowns. Anthony, Case Hatch, what's your over under for Case Hatch touchdowns? You think he's going to get in the end zone this year?
I think he probably gets in the end zone. There's a lot of hype around him, man. Kind of like Joe said, he's a hard guy not to like. Like, just everything about him is really special. But in terms of, like, if I'm actually putting money on it and I'm betting on Case Hatch over touchdowns, I don't think I'm touching anything over 2.5, honestly.
And that's a fair assessment. All right, moving off our star fullback, that will be a 5th round draft pick at least minimum. I want to talk about conference realignment first. Again, unfortunately, I haven't quite listened to the amount of podcasts that I used to and done as much research as I wanted to, because it just feels like everything's been bad. Even when it doesn't involve ASU, it feels like everything's been bad. USC, UCLA leave. The alliance is dead and broken, and there never was, if you will. And then the Big Ten gets this new deal with CBS, Fox Sports, all the big wigs, and it leaves room for 4 teams. And then you hear the SEC has room for 4 teams. There's no rumors of ASU going anywhere, and the Pac-12 is still just sitting by saying, hey, we're good with what we have. We have a gentleman's agreement, and everything should be okay. In 3 to 5 years, where is this ultimately going to put Arizona State? Because this is what I'm worried about first and foremost. We can get by recruiting allegations, missing a bowl game. Things take time to develop, and we can look past that. But if we're not in a big enough conference to make some noise or do anything, I just feel like we're going to get left behind. Joe, I want to start with you. Where do you see ASU in 3 to 5 years, and are we going to be left behind?
It is such a wild time, and it's so hard to wrap a head around it, because it's so completely unprecedented. If you kind of go through the pecking order, to get to the answer to the question, if you go through the pecking order of the conference, you'd have to think that Oregon and Washington are probably 2 schools that are the most appealing. Stanford's there as well. Utah has some appeal as well. So, I mean, I think ASU's in the top 4 if you're, kind of considering if these pieces are going to disperse around, what's going to happen with that. But man, I mean, there are a lot of programs across the country that would be in a higher spot if the Big Ten, because the Big Ten just seems to have kind of total dominion over it. They kind of like snuck up and became this huge, massive deal, right? A lot of people talk about the SEC, and they're still a massive power, and they do it on the field. But man, the offseason talk has been really about the Big Ten and the prominence of that conference there. So, I mean, my gut tells me that you just don't really see ASU making a big leap. It just doesn't seem to be very, on brand for things. Mm-hmm. It might take some significant changes, administratively to get to that point. And I don't know if that'll happen. So I tell you, man, your guess is as good as mine, quite frankly. It's just hard to think that they'll be in one of those super power conferences.
Mm-hmm. That's frustrating to hear. Anthony, what do you think? Are you on the same level as Joe here?
Yeah, I think Joe hit the nail on the head with it doesn't feel on brand for ASU to really make a move like that. Now, in my opinion, what they should do versus what they will do, I think they should. I mean, ASU has been kind of behind for a while in terms of NIL and just moving forward in the college landscape. Mm-hmm. I think joining the Big 12 would be, in my personal assessment, I think that would be a wise decision, especially if they went along with U of A. I don't see the Big 10 really panning out for them, just because I think the Big 10 is really just waiting for Notre Dame and then when Notre Dame goes, or if Notre Dame goes, they'll poach Oregon or something like that. I think the Big 12 makes a lot of sense. You look at, there's a lot of schools in close proximity. They've played a lot of Big 12 schools in the past. They're playing Oklahoma State this year. We've seen them in the past play Texas Tech. But kind of like what Joe said, it just doesn't feel, unless there is some massive changes in the administration, I find it hard to believe ASU actually making a jump to one of these other conferences.
It's crazy to think that Todd Graham actually was ahead of the game here by recruiting all those Texas commits and all the Oklahoma commits. And here we are now trying to keep those ties with California. And we may even be in a conference with San Diego State. And that could be our only Cali school that we have moving forward. So this is what bums me out ultimately is I want to have a seat at the table, right? We all want to have a seat at the table and to play for something meaningful. I mean, but you look at Cincinnati this past year making it, and who knows, right? Who knows? You go to the Big 12 where they have the past 2 or 3 NCAA tournament winners in Kansas and Baylor, and I'm kind of blanking who was right before them. So basketball-wise, it's a great move. And I think, for Bobby Healey and company, that would be wonderful for them. I mean, go over and play in Texas and then in Oklahoma school and the Kansas schools yearly. Like, that's great for basketball. Absolutely no issues there. But when you're talking football, like, you could talk me into it, but now they're doing it out of necessity. And correct me if I'm wrong here, for a school that's supposed to be all about innovation, for you guys saying that this is on brand, that we're not going to do it, I just kind of feel like that's a big yikes, or as Russell Westbrook would put it,
wild shot,
right? like shouldn't George Kliavkoff be going to everybody and be like, let's do ABC, let's partner together doing this? Why is the Pac-12 so quiet and okay with what's going on? Anthony, do you think that they're just waiting to see what happens right now and being reactionary?
Yeah, I think the Pac-12 as a whole has been scared. I think Kliavkoff was kind of put in a difficult situation with how he ended up being commissioner and his predecessor. The Pac-12 is interesting to me in terms of they haven't ever really been known, at least in the last 15, 20 years, for making giant waves in men's basketball or in football. And those are the sports that really they're the revenue sports. They bring in the money. You look across the nation, Joe mentioned it earlier, the SEC dominates football on the field. The Big 12 typically dominates when it comes to basketball. Where does that leave the Pac-12? Usually baseball, which is normally the number 3 of the revenue sports. And then, other sports that matter, but don't necessarily bring in the money, like wrestling, like hockey, gymnastics, etc. So it's just tough. And I think the Pac-12 is, I'm really interested to see what becomes of the Pac-12 in the next 3 to 5 years, more so than I am just college football as a whole.
Joe, does this affect your, I don't want to say fandom. Obviously your father being who he is and what he does for a living, but does it affect your fandom to a point? And again, fandom's not what I'm trying to say here, but do you get my phrasing?
Yeah, I get it, but you can look at it a few different ways because there are folks that have, some of the ones that are the most sour about things have said, hey, let's go to the Mountain West or restart the WAC or some things like that. Like let's try to dominate a lower conference. I'm not necessarily advocating for that, but there could be something if the Pac-12 remains in some form or fashion. I mean, it's just hard to believe that like Oregon is going to be around in a conference here on the West Coast for the long haul. I mean, they're going to find somewhere to go. They're too valuable. But there's going to be a place for, the teams like even Utah. I mean, is Utah going to be on a large scale as good as they become in football? And if it's consistent as they've been, do they offer enough on a large scale by comparison to like a Washington or like a Notre Dame or these other schools? So basically kind of what I'm getting to is, rolling with the punches of it and seeing the benefit of, okay, if they happen not to go to one of these power conferences, what does that look like? Does that still give you some opportunities? Does that put ASU in a position to maybe win, 8, 9, 10 games a year, as the case has been 6, 7, 8 games a year on average, over the last couple decades? So that could be a thing, because there's something to be said for being a Missouri or something like that, where,
Sure.
You join the power conference and you have a little peak there, but you kind of get stomped. I mean, Missouri was pretty big deal in the Big 12 before they left. And then again, they peaked pretty high there, kind of the 2012, 13, 14 type of era, but it's tough going for them there. So, that's an example that I think is like, do you want to be, like what's going to be with Texas in the SEC? Are they going to be able to jump right in and be dominant? I don't think so, because they've been what they've been in the Big 12 for so many years. So, for me, it won't affect too much. I kind of like the prospect of getting somehow involved with the Big 12. I was kind of, shocked in a sense by some of the statements that were made at like Pac-12 Media Day, when there was like some, sub-tweeting type of shade in the verbal form there going on, because I'd like to see that happen. It seems like the most realistic way, because you got to make a move. And I just don't think that, the Pac-12 or Pac-10 or whatever it's going to be called in the future, if they're adding San Diego State and Fresno State and Boise State, because I don't think they're ever going to lure anybody that's already in a powerful conference. So, again, just kind of rolling with the punches and seeing the possible advantages, because it kind of goes with my, like, I don't back the pack thing, the mentality of folks who say, if Oregon goes and wins a national championship, then there's revenue to share among the teams. That's like if ASU were to be in the SEC and be a, 4-8 team. Yeah, they're making a lot of money, but they're getting their, tails whipped every week. So there are pros and cons to, pretty much every scenario.
You're never too high and you're never too low, Joe. That's the one thing I love hearing about your podcast, is you're never too high, never too low. You kind of wrangle everything in together. So I appreciate your outlook there, Joe.
It's never as good or as bad as it seems. And, I've followed ASU for going on 25, 30 years now. And it's like, there are ebbs and flows, and you kind of hover around a similar point to where, again, can't get too high, can't get too low. Just kind of take it for what it is.
This is still better than 2020, right? We still have a full slate of college football games going forward, so anything is better than that. Anthony, does this affect your fandom at all? Again, fandom's not the word I'm going with, but for lack of better terms, here you go. Is it affecting you at all looking forward?
In terms of what's going to become of ASU in the future?
Correct.
I don't think so. I think that's a tough one, honestly. I don't think it should affect whether it be my fandom or anyone's fandom toward whether it be Arizona State or any of their universities that they've covered or attended anywhere across the country. I think it's the evolution of sports. I think it's new, and I think it's scary. But at the end of the day, that's why you love sports. Right? You love them because you don't know what's coming next, especially on the field. You look at, that's what makes the great games. It's the last second touchdowns that nobody saw coming. Well, I guarantee you nobody that wasn't in the meeting saw USC and UCLA leaving the Pac-12 coming. Yeah, it's scary. Yeah, it's new. Yes, it's bad for some schools. But at the end of the day, it's exciting. It gives us something to talk about. And it makes college sports a lot of fun to continue seeing what comes next. So to answer the question in a long way, no, I think it only honestly grows it, because it's just exciting to see what's next.
We are turning towards a huge 64 team, 68 team conference, if you will, right? That's what the ultimate goal is out of everything in the 5 to 10 year span, right? This is what we're ultimately going for. Do you guys think it's going to be 20 versus 20, Big 10 versus SEC going forward? Joe, let's start with you.
I mean, everything just seems to be phasing toward, I hate to use the phrase because the connotation around here, but pro model, right? Like their conference is not in the conference of like the Pac-12 conference, but like the AFC and the NFC type of thing, where you're going to just have these big chunks of teams that are going to be competing in some fashion that we just haven't, it's hard for us to grasp in our heads right now, as far as, most teams play like 3 non-conference games and 9 conference games, that sort of thing, but just some other pod method or whatever it may be. And that works itself out. And it's just like a completely different landscape than we've ever seen, obviously largely based on TV ratings and those possibilities and things like that. So it just seems like it's going to grow, because it just doesn't seem like it's like bottlenecking at any soon point where they're going to say, okay, cool, we're fine at 15 teams or something like that. Like there's just going to be more and more, because there's too much value, I think, in being able to put together some of those matchups. What
do you think, Anthony?
Yeah, I think we're trending toward somewhat of a pro model, whether it be AFC, NFC style, or I think more realistic to what college sports is starting to become, more of what the ACC is doing in terms of getting rid of their divisions. But the schools will have 3 opponents that they'll play consistently year in, year out. And then it'll rotate their other 9 opponents or so. So I could see, super conferences or 2 giant, a West and an East or a North and a South. And they kind of function the way that the ACC is going to function. The teams, like if ASU were to be in one, then they would obviously play U of A and then maybe Oregon and Utah like consistently. And then their other opponents would rotate. So I think we're probably leaning toward more of that. But honestly, at this point, like I have no idea. Like everything is so fluid that things could change in the next 30 days or they could change in the next 3 years. I don't think anybody really knows.
Hey, I've been saying this since the alliance came around. Why don't you just stick to one thing? The first game of the year, you play your FCS. You keep Arizona, a Utah, UCLA, whoever you want on the schedule, just like you said. But then the next week, you're going to Louisville. Mm-hmm. Next week, you got Florida coming in. The week after that, you're going to Boston College. Next week, you got Vanderbilt coming in, and you just keep that rolling. Like that would get the ratings up all over the place in every part of the country. But what do I know? I'm just a sports podcaster, as are you guys, right? What do we know? But moving on to Arizona State this year, Joe, I listened to your guys' 2-hour and 45-minute podcast while I was working out.
It was beefy, yeah.
Outside, yeah, it was a beefy one, but a lot of great information. I really enjoyed it. But Anthony, I want to hear from you first. What is Arizona State football's ceiling and their floor this year?
Ooh, I think their ceiling is probably 9 wins. And that is a high ceiling. I think before Emory got here and before a lot of the guys got here after spring ball, I think there was a lot of disappointment. There was a lot of anger, a lot of frustration with all of the players and, quite frankly, the quality of players that they lost, especially on the defensive side of the ball. But looking at the schedule and after being out there during fall camp, talking to some of these guys, I think they have the potential to win 9 games. Now, on the flip side of that coin, I think they also could lose some very winnable games and probably hover around the 4-win mark. It's just a matter of, do they mesh as quickly as they need to? Because a lot of these guys, all they've had time together was fall camp. A lot of these guys weren't here in the spring. Emory wasn't here in the spring. And obviously he's the face of the program at this point. So we'll see. I think next week's game against NAU is going to be a glorified scrimmage in a way. They should, and quite frankly, they will dominate NAU. But that Oklahoma State game is going to be really interesting just to see if they can keep up. And if they can keep up, like if they lose that game, which that's the expectation, but if they're able to hang around for a while in that game, I think that is a win for Arizona State fans moving forward through the rest of the season. So 9-win ceiling, 4-win floor. I think they probably get to 7 wins.
Joe, I heard that you were predicting 7-5. Do you think their floor would be around the 8-9 wins? And do you think that their floor, could be the 4 or 5 win mark, and their ceiling would be the 8-9 threshold?
Yeah, I mean that's a really realistic range, because if you're putting even a realistic ceiling where you're being kind of generous with it, I mean there are 3 losses because this is not a very good team on the road. And there are some tough games on the road. They have some late season games and some environments, playing teams that if they were here, you'd be a lot more confident in. Colorado, Washington State, that sort of thing. USC, I think the USC is all over the board as far as what some people think, something that they're overhyped. I kind of buy into their offense, that they're going to win some games this year. Utah's done what they've done. Oklahoma State's done what they've done. So, that ceiling of 9 wins is going to require ASU to win some games this year that they haven't won in the past, whether that's, against level of competition or, destinations on the road in times of year that ASU has just really, really struggled, like road games and, cold weather climates in late October, November, that sort of thing. As far as the floor is concerned, yeah, I mean, I'd say 4 or 5 wins, something like that. There are a lot of ways that this whole thing could go. I think if the team stays healthy, at a variety of positions, of course, then having a 500 or better record, I think, is just very, very feasible. The topic, maybe we'll talk about it, but everybody's been raving about this locker room environment and the camaraderie. And I've heard people that I trust that are deeply involved in the program say that it's the best locker room environment since the peak Todd Graham years, like 2013, 14 type of stuff. And I know that that's a very commonly expressed notion in preseason. I mean, it's rare that you're going to say, yeah, our locker room really, really sucks and everybody hates each other. You're not going to hear that stuff, but it just seems to be kind of more legit this year than before. And I think that can do some things. So yeah, I'd say in total agreement that the perfect stars aligning thing is going to be 9-3. The lower end is going to be that 4 or 5 win mark. That's kind of where I fall somewhere in the middle there. 7-5, my prediction.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. In fact, I said if they got 6 wins, I'd be happy. If they got 6 wins, and I hate saying that. I hate being like, oh, if they get 6 wins, that's going to be fine. It's kind of like the Diamondbacks this year. Yeah, they're better than they were last year. Like, whoa. What are we really talking about here at the end of the day, right? Are we talking about getting to the playoffs or just being good enough? Or you want to talk about being like the Pirates or the Orioles, right? That's kind of where my mindset is. And you play to win the game, right, Herm? So speaking of the culture, before I get to Herm, the one thing that I always felt that made the Phoenix Suns special the last few years was their organic chemistry. And I've heard a lot about that before even listening to your guys' podcast and everything. Anthony, do you feel that there's that vibe around that camaraderie, that organic chemistry, prove everybody wrong mentality, if you will?
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about outside noise, right? The players have said it 1,000,005 different times. And we saw the video of when Jaden Daniels transferred, what that locker room was like. I think it was a shell of a locker room at that point. But on the other side of that, they were unified, right? They had one common enemy in that moment. And I think now, after letting that settle, they've got their guy, right? I think that this team has bonded over the fact that there's a lot of people out there that don't think that they can do a lot. That there's a lot of people out there that were on this team that chose to leave. I think that inspires a lot of those guys. And we talked to Daniel Ngata, who had said, when we asked him about the outside noise in the locker room, if this is the closest they've ever been, and he said that he doesn't like to answer that question with it's the closest we've ever been. He instead answered it with, there aren't any cancers in the locker room, which I thought was interesting, because does that mean that there were cancers before and they're gone now? Or who knows? So I think this team is inspired, and I think the locker room is definitely a test to that. And we'll see when they get into some of these close games, or some of those very challenging ones like the Oklahoma States or the Utahs or USCs. We'll see just how close that locker room is, because there isn't a better time to show it than in those difficult circumstances.
And that's my fear is, we can talk about this. You hear about it. They can be friends, buddies, and all that stuff. But when push comes to shove, when it's, third quarter, you're down 14 with the ball, what is it going to look like? And at what point, and I want to get to Herm Edwards now, at what point does the football team just kind of crumble, knowing that he might not be back next year? Like, their leader might not be back, So what is the threshold for Herm Edwards and staying? Is it 8 wins? Is it 9 wins and a bowl win? Is it making it to the playoffs? Is it Rose Bowl? Joe, I want to start with you. Like, what would it take for Herm Edwards to stick around another year? And I don't even want to talk about the allegations aside, just straight football recruiting, what we've seen on the field the last 3-4 seasons.
So, I mean, something to keep in mind, and this is by no sort of intel or anything like that. It's just a thought, something I've had, and other people have discussed as well. Is it may not be as much what brings Herm Edwards back as much as it is what may allow him to retire in grace, as opposed to departing the university, on bad terms or being fired. Because I think that that's almost a scenario that everybody would probably like, as far as the high ups there, is for them to be able to have a good season. He can go out on his own terms.
I love it.
So that sort of thing. So, if you go out and, if ASU were to win the Rose Bowl or make the playoff, that's going to be hard to step away from. But if we're being realistic, if ASU wins 7 games, better than that 10th place prediction, you can kind of go out on your own, as opposed to if ASU were to win 3 or 4 games. If someone retires, then it's like, all right, you're just retiring. That's just to save the public shame of basically being fired. So I guess, again, this is just a complete guess, but I think that even in some very good scenarios, maybe it's not realistic to think that there would be a coaching change, but just under different circumstances. So, and again, I think that would be a small win in the eyes of the administration, because if Herm Edwards can go out on his own terms as opposed to any other way, I think that that's what they would want. Then we'll see what happens.
Correct me if I'm wrong before I get to Anthony. When he was hired, we were originally talking about 5 to 6 seasons. Does that ring a bell? I thought I heard that quite a few times. And when you just said that, retiring and looking at the timeline, that kind of fits it. Does that sound familiar to you, Joe?
It does. It's also kind of under the the narrative that whether there was any meat to it or not, but there was a lot of talk that like Danny Gonzalez was going to be the next guy. Obviously, talk about Antonio Pierce being the next guy. Those sort of succession plans, which rarely seem to work except for at the really, really, big schools that can put like, a Duke basketball or something like that. So yeah, it does kind of fit that. I mean, Herm Edwards was never really brought here to be a 8 to 10 year guy. It just doesn't really make sense. It's just someone to at the time, hopefully bring some stability to the program and run that pro model so that he could have people doing what they do. And obviously that went the way that it did and has gone the way that it has. But initially, yeah, just to kind of bring some stability and then usher in somebody for, the future, which is what it seemed. Again, that's not going off of any, concrete evidence, but it just seems like the reading between the lines type of thing.
Anthony, what is it going to take for Herm Edwards to stick around one more year? Do you kind of agree with Joe's notion that this could be like a retirement, a nice send-off party? Or do you think if he gets 9, 10 wins, Rose Bowl, whatever it may be, he might stick around?
Yeah, in all honesty, the retirement, whether it be somewhat of a forced retirement or a happy retirement, has been the consensus among a lot of media members that I've talked to. It would take the gates of hell to open and ASU to go winless for Ray to fire his buddy. I don't foresee that happening. I think for Herm to stay, though, if I'm answering the question, and we talked about this on our pod the other day, I can't see a way that you stop ASU fans from rioting in Tempe unless Herm and ASU find a way to finish the season in the top 25. Now, if that's 25 on the nose or 24, whatever, obviously that would be the more likely scenario for them if they finish in the top 25. But I think it's clear to everybody that Herm has reached his potential. This isn't a team that is going to win 10 games with Herm at the helm. It's just simply not. He wasn't a great coach in the NFL, and that's translated here. He hasn't been a phenomenal coach at ASU, and that's totally fine. However, at a certain point, it is time to move on, whether that is his termination or his retirement. That's yet to be seen. But just kind of echoing what Joe said, I think retirement is probably the more likely of the two.
I'm okay with that. That is just fine. You want to save face, and I think that also helps any other coaches that come in if anybody were to get into hot water for any numerous reasons, right? The university is willing to work with you and put you out on good terms, and I think that's a show of good faith as well too. But as you said, Ray's not going to go out and fire him. Joe, what are you benching nowadays?
Dude, I haven't maxed in a while. I need to get up some combine reps. I like to do the combine thing. Usually get up to about 20 on 225, But yeah, I'll have to get out there and give it a shot. I'm getting a little up there, so I got to be smart with what I do. But still throw around some LBs. I did shoulders today, so that should be the focal point. That's I put on sleeves for some reason, but just got a shoulder workout like 2 hours ago. So we're still steadily pumped, so we're good.
It's not Sunday gun day, so it's okay. Anthony, are you having any gummies or Four Peaks brews tonight?
Not tonight, man. Not tonight. We got a big day at the office tomorrow. We've been moving into our new studio, and we just got a lot going on. And we've got a big announcement that we're super excited for everybody to see tomorrow. So yeah, man, it's a lot of fun, but no OGs and no Four Peaks, not tonight.
Well, unfortunately, I will not be joining you guys. So there's your big announcement that you can go and pass to everybody. A few quick questions. Before I get to Ray Anderson, because we just kind of delved into her metrics real quick. NIL, the Sun Angel Foundation. As of Monday, I just heard you guys' podcast. It was only up to like $1,500 in a couple hours. Do either of you have any updates on that? Is there ways for fans to check in on that? Do you guys have any additional information?
So are you talking about the Sun Angel or the Tempe NIL, the player-led one?
Ooh, give me information for both. I might be confused now.
The player-led one is the one that came out very recently this week, and so that's probably the one you're referring to. The Sun Angel is more kind of the booster donor-driven one
that's
was
right.
announced a
Thank
couple
you.
weeks ago. So yeah, the player-driven one is a very interesting concept because it involves like message boards and video, like game film breakdown type of stuff that will be player-led. And you got to hope and assume there's going to be some sort of monitoring by somebody in the athletic department or the team, because that could be Pandora's box in a very challenging way if you have some fans that get in there and, say some unruly things. But, it's not a bad idea. It's interesting because realistically speaking, the money that they'd raise if they spread it across the entire team, I mean, it's not a ton of money if you're talking about 75 to 100 plus. If everybody on the entire roster, walk-ons included, get it, I mean, it's going to be challenging to raise anything that moves the needle in that regard, but something's better than nothing. And it's just, it's like the conference alignment stuff. It's such uncharted territory that everything is so strange and you can't really predict because there's just no precedent.
I could talk about the NCAA and all that stuff for like another hour, and I don't even want to get into that. Anthony, what are your thoughts on the NIL initiatives that have come around recently for Arizona State? Like finally they're here.
Yeah, I think just like you said, finally they're here. I think it's something that should have been done a while ago in terms of ASU's number one in innovation, right? But they're last to the party in terms of supporting their athletes in this way. I think it was a total botch on ASU's part, but hey, the players have got it together. We've got the Sun Angel Collective now that is led, kind of like Joe said, by a lot more of the boosters and donors. So they're on their way. And this is something just like the rest of college football that is evolving. It's new. The interesting part about the player-led collective is that ASU wasn't the first to do it. Is there was just over the course of the last couple of weeks, teams across the nation, Texas A&M being one of them. We saw the U of A had done it, I believe either today they launched it or yesterday. So there are a bunch of universities that have kind of done this in terms of player-led NIL collectives. But I think at some point the NCAA is going to have to crack down on what they are allowed to do in terms of the player-led thing. Because kind of like Joe said, it gets real sticky here when you get message boards and there's no middleman now between the players and fans. And players in other universities, what's to say there's a fan or somebody within another university that has Arizona State on the schedule is like, hey, here's $100 to the thing. I'm going to join the film breakdown. And then now you've got all that. Like there's so many interesting things. And the part about the player-led collective is it entirely cuts out businesses. And there is millions upon millions of dollars just being left out there. And I don't think that favors the NCAA very much if you've got a bunch of sponsors now being cut out of NIL deals. So we'll see what happens. But like you said, they finally got something.
Now, when it comes to the Sun Angel one, because I've had some conversations, there's some folks that I know fairly well that are either involved or will be involved. And there are some interesting ideas that are on the table. Can't obviously go into any kind of detail about them. Nothing's really launched on that regard, but some conversations I've had are pretty cool. And it does kind of factor into that, innovation type of thing. So if that is deployed, it'd be interesting and I think beneficial. So, they're trying to make up some ground, and I hope that that's something that fans get on board with, even if they're completely dissatisfied with what's going on, because whether, if there's a coaching change or any sort of administrative changes, that NIL bank account, so to speak, is going to be something that any potential candidates are going to keep in mind. What sort of resources are there? I mean, the NIL is kind of becoming almost like the new donor booster type of thing. Like That's where they're looking at. So, we can take this conversation a lot of different ways, but hopefully they catch up. And I'm, fairly encouraged by some of the conversations I've had.
Especially with Arizona State's, what is that? How many people that they graduate per year? Like they have the highest per capita, they have the biggest student body. After the fact, it's surprising that it's taken this long, but that kind of alludes to fans not really showing up like they should be and wear gold, or no, I'm going to wear white and black and do all these kind of colors. It kind of feeds into that to a point, and it's still frustrating to have to talk about. And I'm going to be supporting the players. I have my own issues with coaching staff, or, Ray Anderson, if you will, which I want to talk about, but it's frustrating that we just can't go out and support like a Clemson, right? Everybody wears orange or they stripe it out. We can't even do that. So I'd love to see the fans step up even more in times like this, as opposed to wanting your team to get 3 wins so-and-so gets fired. I wouldn't. That's just crazy to me. I would never want my team to get 3 wins. What is the point of that? What good does that do anybody? If we all eat crow and we get 11 wins and go to the Rose Bowl, like, we'd happily do that. We'll do it on air twice even, right? So that part doesn't make sense to me. But top to bottom, everything starts with management. And Ray Anderson comes in, top 15, yada, yada. That's great. We all know that's where everybody wants to be. That's just not going to happen realistically. So to hold yourself to that level is wonderful, but you need to hold yourself to a higher standard, how you present yourself, if you will. The stuff that went down with Bobby Healey and Bobby Healey's wife, and not really stepping up to the plate and being reactionary again. And then all this stuff going down. I just have a hard time believing in Ray Anderson right now. Whoop, I got to just plug my thing back in. So, Joe, while I figured that out, where are we at with Ray Anderson moving forward?
It's a tough position to have been in if you look at the the recent past, because there are matters that are it's tough for someone in that position to go into tremendous detail about. It's not a great look to not say anything. Sometimes if you say what you can say, people take it as just, generic boilerplate stuff. So that's kind of more of a commentary on, how people pick apart certain things. I'm not a huge fan at all about folks really hinging on the top 15 talk that was said in a press conference, because, if you go back to press conferences for any coach hire, everybody says stuff that is way beyond the potential of what they can do. I just saw like a flashback of when Kevin Sumlin was hired. He's talking about getting to the Rose Bowl, that kind of thing. So it's a difficult position, because I know that there are a lot of folks that I trust and respect internally, that have a tremendous amount of respect for him as a leader internally. I do understand, of course, that the public perception is what it is. We still don't know what the NCAA outcome is going to be, and if that's something that is severe, then it's difficult not to consider changes about it. So it's there has been some good that's been done with some hires on the whole. I know not everybody always evaluates the entire body of work of all athletics. There are good things going on. There are advancements. You do have the unveiling of the mullet center, stadium, or arena, whatever it's called, for hockey and wrestling. So there are, I'm not trying to shine it up too much, but there are some good things going on. But that's going to be the one of the most interesting storylines in the time that I've been following ASU, again, 25, 30 years. One of the most interesting storylines is going to be what happens. What does this athletic administration look 1 year from right now?
It just seems murky. I felt like even with Lisa Love back in the day, there was a clear path to what she was doing and what she was not doing. Right. It's really weird. Anthony, where do you stand on Ray Anderson and his leadership team moving forward?
Yeah, I think it's a tough question, because like Joe said, there is a lot of really good things going on outside of the revenue sports. You look at wrestling, you look at hockey, gymnastics, softball had a phenomenal season. Like
golf is always killing it, right?
Golf, yes, they were in the national championship. So there is so much to be happy about if you're an ASU fan, if you're not looking at the revenue sports right off the bat. However, with that said, revenue sports typically make or break legacies. They typically make or break jobs. I don't think Ray's going to get fired anytime soon. I think I think Dr. Crow is happy with just kind of letting the athletic program just carry on, with basketball being kind of average, with football being average and baseball being average, and succeeding anywhere else. So we'll see what happens, but I don't know. In terms of leadership, I think Ray gets a little bit of a bad rep sometimes because he is in charge, obviously, of athletics, but how much of what the athletic program has failed to do or been kind of behind the curve on isn't necessarily Ray's fault. We don't know the conversations that him and Dr. Crow has, because Ray can want something, but if Crow says, hey, I don't necessarily want to go this direction, or if I don't want this, he ultimately has the final say. So again, I don't know how much of this you put on Ray, how much you put on Crow. It's the administration as a whole. I would just like to see on the same page. And that's something that I feel like they've had a tough time doing over the last few years, at least.
That's a fair ask. That right there is a fair ask. Just be on the same page and have a plan. My issue with still talking about the wrestlings, the gymnastics, which I love. I'm a sports sicko, you know. I'll go to a lot of the University of Utah gymnastics stuff here with my wife, and she loves to go. So I'll watch any of those stuff. Wrestling, I watched golf on TV, you know, when they were in the championship. So, but that feels very Michael Crowish. And who was that guy that was running the Pac-12 not too long ago? And what was the sentiment he was always saying? And then Kliakov comes in here and he's like, yeah, we shouldn't have done that. That's the problem. So if you're going to be about innovation, be about it. Don't talk about it, be about it. Who's excited to go see a Coyotes game at the Arizona State Arena next year? Joe, are you going to go?
I'll try, man. I'll try to pull some strings. I'm eager to see like what that environment is like. Like, is it going to be a real tough ticket just because of the capacity, or what the deal is going to be? I mean, I have yet to visit the new facility, so I'm eager to get out there. You know, I'm a big ASU wrestling guy. It's my understanding that might have to kind of split sometime. I've heard some rumors about that, just because to try to work in the schedule with the Coyotes. But I'll check out anything there. But it's going to be a cool thing, and especially for hockey. Obviously, you know, I've been to a handful of games at Oceanside. I mean, this is just such a massive upgrade that it's going to be great. And, you know, Greg Powers, both Greg Powers, Zeke Jones, two of my favorite coaches that ASU's ever had. Two of my favorite, you know, people in sports I've ever been around. These guys are awesome guys. So just fired up for that whole thing to come together, including the Coyotes.
What about you, Anthony? You going to catch a Coyotes game or an Arizona State hockey game first?
I'll catch them all, man. Honestly, like Mullet Arena, having been there a couple of times, it's going to really shock some fans, I think. And I think a lot of the upset or depressed fans with the state of Arizona State athletics should get out to Mullet Arena for the very first game, whether it be Coyotes or ASU, because it is a very awesome environment. It reminds me of when the Chargers were in between where they're at now, in between SoFi and Qualcomm, when they had that season and a half or 2 seasons at StubHub, a little soccer stadium. You could say whatever you want about, oh, it's, you know, there's not a lot of people, but like that changes the environment. And especially for ASU, especially for the Coyotes that sometimes have a difficult time bringing in consistently a lot of fans, I think they're going to love it. The student section is awesome. It's right up against the glass. Like, it's awesome, man.
It's going to be a vibe there. That's what I feel like. It's just going to be an absolute vibe no matter who's playing. I'm excited to travel down and hopefully see it sometime soon. I'm really excited about Arizona State basketball this year. I think they're going to have a hell of a team. They've got a few killers on the team now. They've got some length and some depth finally. If Marcus Bagley can stay healthy, that's going to be a fun team to watch. But final question, Joe, are you excited for Sun Devil football this year, or are you kind of nervous?
I'd say it's a little bit of both, but it's more excitement than nervousness because of how they've been able to load up. Getting Emory Jones, that's a big deal. That guy's a talented player. Get Xavier Valade. They've made some acquisitions that I think some folks are sleeping on, and they have some players that are coming up through the ranks. A guy like Connor Soley, Brad Denny is raving about him, saying he's going to be like the next kind of Archuleta Tillman type of player, just that dog on the field. So, it's always exciting because, I feel like I typically have a fairly accurate assessment of what's going on. You know what I mean? I got a little bit of a finger on the pulse. I've seen this for a while. I'm not the type that, there are folks that are always, hey, this team's going to go to the Rose Bowl and they end up winning 6 or 7 games, So, again, having what I feel to be fairly accurate expectations, of course, it can go anywhere. So there's, excitement in that. And I just take it on a very simple level. Like, it's cool to go to college football games and hang out with my friends. Obviously I'm just a dude out there. I'm not media guy. I'm not, press pass guy. Go out and have a good time, have some beverages with Crafty Devils and all of them. So it's just a time of year that's fun. I mean, with all the crap that everybody's gone through over the last couple of years, and obviously life's better now than it was a year or two ago, it's still good to just keep perspective and to be able to go out to a college football game on a Thursday or a Saturday. It's a good day for me.
I've been seeing those tailgates for quite a while on Twitter, so hopefully someday I can make it down for another game, be able to do so. Anthony, are you excited for college football in Arizona State specifically this year, or are you nervous?
Nah, man, I'm excited. Football's back. It's the best time of the year. It could be Arizona State, it could be Alabama, it could be the University of South Carolina. Like, I really don't care. Football is back. I think Arizona State fans should be excited. And I think they should mirror a little bit of what the locker room is kind of feeling with, everybody says we can't do this, we can't do that. Just go out, have a good time. Like, what's the worst that happens, right? What's the worst scenario for this team? That they don't do good and then Herm gets canned or retires? That's a win in my book. Or they win 9 games, right? The more like the situation that would encourage fans more if they win 9 games or 7 games. Like, that's a successful season too. Like, I really don't think that this year specifically for ASU can be just horrendous for ASU fans. Football's back literally next week, or this week is the last week without Sun Devil football for a long time. So do whatever you got to do. Do your grocery shopping, your chores, whatever, because next Thursday is going to be a blast, man.
Well, Joe's going to be busy this Saturday. He's going to be watching Nebraska Northwestern at 10:30 in the morning. He's going to be watching Vanderbilt Hawaii at night, right? So you got to get all your stuff in the next 2 days, Joe.
There's some solid games. I haven't looked at the slate a bit, but I have looked at it. Yeah, I mean, you've got like some decent matchups there. So
you got some Nevada, New Mexico State going on, Duquesne versus Florida State, UConn, Utah State. Come on, what's not to love, right?
I mean, Florida State dropped one to an FCS team last year, so things could get weird in a hurry, perhaps over there. It's back, and it's an exciting time. And like you're saying, it's hard for me to see this team not doing what is kind of the status quo for ASU. Again, you look at the numbers. If you take ASU's wins and losses over the last 20 years, it's almost like a perfect bell curve of you have a couple seasons that are below 6 to 8. You have a couple seasons that are 9 or more, but you got this big chunk in the middle that's 6, 7, or 8 wins on the year. So it just kind of is what it is. And again, we're kind of in general agreement here that 7 wins sounds about right. Maybe, give or take a win. You're in that realm of what you expect. Now, of course, no matter what, you got to beat Arizona at the end because those fans, for whatever reason, I guess it's entirely impossible for them to be as bad or worse than they've been over the last 25, 26 games of their existence. So I guess it's easy to get a little confident, but they seem to have some excessive confidence. So that needs to happen as well. But yeah, I mean, it's a fun time of year. And I just feel like this team could surprise. I think it's more likely this team surprises than it does disappoint. I think it's more likely. And I'm not saying it
for sure this year.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's massively likely, but I'm saying I think it's more likely that they get to that, 8-9 win range than they do the 4-5, especially 4. I mean, to only win 4 games would be bad.
Not great.
Doesn't happen around here. So again, all these questions will begin to be answered here in a very short time.
Dennis Erickson even got 5 wins, right? So anything lower than that, and you're really doing a bad job. You guys, thank you so much for coming on tonight. Everybody hit the like button, share this out. We really appreciate you guys. Anthony, where can everybody find you and your work?
You can follow me at Anthony_Totri, and you can follow the podcast at PHNX_Sun Devils.
And Joe, where can everybody find you as well?
You can follow me, Joe Healey 42. If you want to follow the podcast, Speak of the Devils, that's a SOTD podcast on the Twitter. Also, devilsdigest.com. I'll be doing a game preview of NAU coming up here pretty soon, and our podcast will be releasing ours. We're recording on Sunday afternoon, maybe out by Sunday night. Should have some good guests on that. I believe we have locked in. I had to pull some strings for this one. A man who will be making his 25th anniversary doing the play-by-play of Arizona State football.
Boom shakalaka!
I love it. I can't wait. We're doing a preview show. Like we're actually getting out there and being able to hear people talk about preview shows now. So I'm excited. Thank you for sharing that. That's even more exciting for me. Anthony, I'm going to be looking to you guys for post game stuff as well too. I'm really excited to be watching you guys this season. Everybody, thank you for watching. Give a shout out to ASAP Sports Network who handles our podcast, and AZ Sports Underground. I will be having an article come out tomorrow, so check me out there as well too. You know what? This was a lot of fun. It felt kind of therapeutic for me too. I appreciate you guys coming on. I am excited for football. I am excited for what's to come for Arizona State. Only time will tell. We're going to get 7 or 8 wins, and we'll talk about it. He's on Fire Podcast.
Urbanvici sets, looks up, and it is caught! Down strong! Blitz coming, Matthews, Palmer extending the play, crosses the field, Larry Fitzgerald. There he scores, it's over! It's insane! To the 4-yard line. Crowder looking, throws it, alley, oh! He puts it down! He puts it down! They're getting a little wobbly. The downfield shot.